All right, get ready. In his book, Treating Pornography Addiction, Dr. Kevin Skinner lays out what he calls an activation sequence. He also calls it, this is a little more funny, I guess, the pornography highway. I think I used to live there in Houston. And what he says is this: when somebody falls to pornography, one of two things happen. One, they look at porn, but there was something before that, right? The idea came into their head about porn, and then they looked at it, right? Two things. But he says in this activation sequence, there are at least 5 stages in between these things. And if what we'll do is look at each stage and ask, how does that apply to me? And we're brutally honest about it, even though it makes us embarrassed. We can then write a deactivation sequence. Because if you go to my website, theporneffect.com, I lay out a lot of advice for the big picture. Prayer and fasting, accountability. You need to get informed. We need to go to counseling if we need counseling. We need to be patient, right? This advice is for when temptation strikes. Here are the 7 things. If you're taking notes, write this down. The first thing is a stimulus or trigger. Stimulus or trigger. Number 2, emotional response. Number 3, the first thought. I'll be saying these again. No one go crazy if you're not. Number 4, chemical release. Number 5, body language. Number 6, the second thought. He calls it the battle. Number 7, the behavior. We're going to go through each of them. Number 1, the trigger. What is it that gets us thinking about porn? What is it that gets the motor going? Now, for some things, it could be rather obvious things, like the Victoria's Secret catalogue. I'm not sure what the secret is, by the way. It seems pretty obvious to me, but never mind, right? It might be seeing a softcore sex scene on television. That might be the trigger. That might be the thing that gets you thinking and gets you down this pornography highway towards porn. But it can be other things that we haven't thought of. Maybe being rejected by a girl or by a boy. Maybe feeling inferior around other men or women. Maybe feeling stressed out. For some people, they are triggered by non-sexual objects. This is how fetishes arise. And usually, these are brought about because when someone was having a sexual experience, there were this particular thing, like a down jacket. I met a guy who was triggered by down jackets, and that's because he experienced sexual abuse in his past and there was a down jacket present in the room. So we need to be really honest with ourselves. What is it that gets me thinking? Here's a fun trigger that no one's articulated. It might be something like this. You might be on Facebook, and that half a centimetre of that girl's head, like comments, or that guy's head, and you just click on it and you start going through their pictures like a stalker. And not funny. And you might be thinking this is harmless. And maybe it is harmless, but maybe it's a trigger. And so when you encounter that, I find the best thing to say is, this is a trigger, to say it out loud. Because what it does is it activates that thinking part of our brain. Number 2, there's the emotional response. We have this emotion of excitement or curiosity. That is coupled with the 3rd step, which is the first thought. We think something. Like, what is it? You tell me. No, not out loud. Think about it. I could look at porn right now. I wonder what would happen if I just typed this girl's name in and click Google Images. What do you think when you have this emotional response to the stimulus? You have to tell me yours. No, you don't. You have to tell you yours, because that's how you can deactivate it. Number 4 is the chemical release. Your body begins to prepare for climax. And if you're using porn, which most of us do, as an escape behavior, that is, you're bored, you're stressed, you're lonely, you're angry, you're tired, and you turn to it just to sort of escape the mundane, then your body knows just what to do when you're feeling like this, and it begins to prepare. And those chemicals, like we referenced earlier, begin to be released. Now, at this point, number 5, we have body language, obviously, because the chemicals are dumped into the system, and so you might get an erection, you might have tingling in the groin, your eyes might dilate. I had someone tell me that for him, he had just this intense shaking, like shivering, as if it were cold, but he wasn't cold. Sweaty palms. All right. This is all indicative of the chemical release. Here we go. Number 6, the second thought. Listen, you won't look at porn unless you authorize yourself to do it. We all have these ways of authorizing ourselves to look at porn or masturbate or whatever sexual sin it is. But the reason he calls this the battle is because we have competing thoughts. On the plus side, or let's say against the porn, we think things like, I can't look at porn. I've looked at it 100 times in the past, it's never made me happy. Stupid, I'm not going to do it. Or you'll think, my 3-year-old's in the same room as me. This is disgusting. I can't do this. Or you think God wouldn't want me to do this. So what are those thoughts for you? Right, that yell against it. Then you have pro thoughts. One more time won't hurt. I've done this 1,000,000 times. I'm not a sexually decrepit rapist yet. One more time's probably not going to do it. Or you'll have something like this. I am past the point of return right now. I know I'm going to fall, so I'm just going to masturbate. Maybe just some softcore porn stuff. I won't get too deep into it. I'll just masturbate and I'll orgasm and I'll feel better. And then I'm going to go repent and just try again. Get it over and done with. What are the ways you authorize your pornography use? Number 7 is the behavior. So whatever thought wins, the behavior ensues. And Dr. Skinner says at this point, once the chemicals have been dumped into the system, almost always the person will fall to pornography. So you can ask yourself the question, if this is a pornography highway, when would be the time to turn around? Well, maybe the trigger, but certainly before the chemical release. All right. Let me close on a word of hope. All right? The wounds you have received didn't come overnight. All right? Maybe you had something traumatic happen to you, but it was an accumulating effect, right? Freedom from this stuff is not going to come overnight either. See, what happens is we turn to porn because we want a quick fix, right? And then when we're hooked on porn, we want a quick fix. We want a pornified solution to our pornography problem. What's the prayer? What prayer do I have to pray? What's the thing? What's the medal I have to wear? Shh, stop it. It's a daily choice. It's a daily battle. But here's something kind of cool. This is a great opportunity to grow in holiness. Here's why. Struggling with porn is a good thing. We often think that struggle is synonymous with give in to. Someone says to us, I've been struggling with porn, and we think they mean, I've been looking at it. And that is what they mean. But that's not what struggle means, right? Struggle means to violently resist. And if we violently resist against porn, we're going to grow in virtue. So with that definition in play, I hope you won't be offended if I say to you, if you're tempted to look at porn, I hope you're struggling with it. The alternative is just give in. And as we violently resist to be better people, to break free of this stuff, it's not as if the virtue of chastity rises, while the rest of the virtues lay dormant. If you imagine, this is a bar graph, by the way. It's like he's caressing I don't know what that is, right? It's like all these virtues begin to rise. I mean, think about it. What is required of the woman who struggles against porn? Patience, perseverance, self-mastery, moral courage. She is becoming a more interesting person. Because people who are virtuous are more interesting. The saints are more interesting than sinners. Right? And so to grow in virtue is to grow in sanctity. Therefore, you and I have a gift that Padre Pio didn't. That Thérèse of Lisieux didn't. Did sexual temptation always exist? Yes. But not in this immediate, ubiquitous, anonymous sense as it does today. We have an opportunity. We show people we love them by preferring them to things. What a beautiful honor we have to be able to prefer Christ to this sin. You know, I remember when I was going to confession one time, for the umpteenth million time to confess porn and masturbation, And I'm standing there in line. I'm thinking, God's mercy is evaporating on me. It's like he's like going to be the soup Nazi from Seinfeld. No more mercy for you! You know? Go home and look that up, yeah. You know, we stand there and we say to ourselves, would God forgive the biggest sinner? Yes. But what about me, we think to ourselves, who come back week after week with this stuff? And we know in our heads that that can't be true, but in our hearts we fear that it will. But as I was waiting there, I remember, maybe the Holy Spirit brought it to mind, that scene from Matthew's Gospel where Peter approaches Christ and says, how many times should I forgive my brother who sins against me? 7 times? And Jesus says, no, 70 times 7. By which he didn't mean 290. What is it? 490. 490. I said 290. You're welcome. Right, he didn't mean 490, right? And then after that, no mercy for you. Right, he meant perfection. He meant consistency. If Christ is going to command us to act in that way, then that way will not be inconsistent with the nature of God, who is infinite in all of his attributes. The same God who had mercy on Moses, the murderer, Rahab, the prostitute, David, the adulterer, Paul, the Christian murderer, will have mercy on us also. I'm reminded of the words of Saint Margaret Mary Alacoque's spiritual director. What's his name? Saint Claude de la Colomière. Or in Australian, Saint Claude de la Colomière. This is what he says. All right, I'm paraphrasing, but it's so beautiful. And if you're just like caught up in porn and sin and crap and no one knows about it, you're totally ashamed and all that, just hear these words. He says, I glorify you, Lord, in making known how good you are towards sinners, and that your mercy prevails over all malice. That no matter how many times or how shamefully or even criminally we fall, a sinner need not be driven to despair of your pardon. It is in vain that your enemy and mine should set new traps for me daily, because he will make me lose everything else but for the hope I have in your mercy. We think of Christ to Faustina in the Divine Mercy Diary. The greater the sinner, the greater right he has to my mercy. Or what about to St. Catherine of Siena in the Dialogue? He says, my mercy is greater than all of the sins and creatures can commit, and therefore it greatly displeases me when they think their sin the greater. Finally, about Therese of Lisieux, on her deathbed. They said, well, it's no wonder you're confident. We don't think you've ever committed a mortal sin in your life. And she says, it's not because of my lack of mortal sin that I have confidence. Even if I had committed the most abominable and shameful sins imaginable, I would still be this confident. Why? Because I've seen the way he spoke to Magdalene. I've heard his words to the woman at the well. No, nothing can frighten me. She says, I know that all of that sin, I would take it broken and bruised, and it would be like a drop of water flicked into the raging furnace of his mercy.